Hello. This lecture is going to continue with our exploration of the way that you can see rhetoric working and you can use the tools of rhetoric to analyze texts beyond your college class. So this lecture is titled Rhetoric Beyond 1302, and I want to show you some examples of the ways that people, normal people, not just your English teacher, talk about rhetoric or advice about how to use rhetoric beyond college. Because rhetorical principles that you've learned in this class still apply. We've been practicing on academic essays, academic articles, but the same principles apply in speeches or when you use social media or specifically Twitter. So I want to look at speeches first because we have some advice from Scandal star Kerry Washington. She was the subject of an interview and an article in a magazine that I read called In Style, and I thought she had some great tips for how to use rhetoric when she's giving a speech. The article, the little article within the big article was called How to Be a Power Player, and it's about how to be effective in a speech. She uses rhetorical principles to explain how she can be a good advocate for the causes that she believes in, but she never uses the names of the principles as we've been taught. I have to give you the MLA citation of the article, so this is it. So in the little blurb written by the author at the beginning of the article, it says in brief, Washington knows how to make people listen and get things done. Here are her 5 tips on how to make one's voice heard even without the mic. Her first one is about audience and the author's ethos or the speaker's ethos. It says, know thy audience, do your research, figure out who you're talking to, especially if their way of thinking is not the same as yours. That's pretty easy to see how researching the audience for a speech would be the same as researching the audience for a text, and how your ethos as a speaker or a writer would be enhanced as someone who really knows who they're talking to as well as what they're talking about. The second one I thought was about purpose, and it has the word goal in there, to be clear about your goals. So if you aren't sure what you're trying to achieve, you won't be able to measure if you've been successful. So know your purpose, know what it will look like when you've reached that purpose. This next one I thought was about audience, ethos, and text, if we consider text pretty broadly. She says, dress the part, and she literally means clothing, and she's kind of gotten famous for the way her character dresses on Scandal. She says, I dress differently when presenting at the MTV Movie Awards than when I'm speaking at the Democratic National Committee. You should too. So in that way, she's really reading her outfit as a kind of visual text, and she knows the difference between what's appropriate for the audience and the occasion, and also her purpose, and so she dresses accordingly. So that has to do with her ethos too, as someone who understands decorum and wants to be either wants to look really stylish and trendy at something like the MTV Movie Awards, or something more conservative and authoritative when speaking in front of political committees. Number 4 was about breathing when you speak, and that's not as relevant for us. But the 5th one is relevant. She says, find the joy. Look for humor when making your point. If it makes people feel, less attacked. Don't be afraid to show your own vulnerability. And for a writer or speaker to show something of themselves and to try to connect with the audience on an emotional level is about their ethos and the kind of rhetorician that they are trying to be. For pathos, I mean, she uses the word feel in this piece of advice. And so it's about the way that you're making people feel. You're trying to reduce their anxiety or their fear of being attacked and lighten them up a little bit, make them feel lighter and happier by making a joke. So moving on from speeches to ways that you can use social media, you have so many choices that it's hard to figure out which kind of audience you want to reach or when your purpose will match up with the social media tool that you are thinking about using. I found this great infographic. It's actually from College Humor, the College Humor website, and it's titled, Where Should You Post That? So in all of these, it's kind of like a flow chart where you start off with one question, like if you're trying to post about, what kind of thought are you trying to share? Is it a profound truth? Is it a cool fact, an emotion? It's just about breakfast, or it's a joke? you can see all these lines leading from those purposes and down to various social media outlets where they would fit in the best. So this is the MLA citation for this infographic/article. So these are the kinds of thoughts that it's assuming you want to share, and you're just trying to figure out which social media outlet should I share it on. So one example, I hope that you can see this okay. If you want to post something about an emotion, the first question is it an emotion you'd like to explain, or do you want to be cryptic? If the answer is I want to be cryptic, and you're sure that the people who will need to know will know, then that's something that you might just put on Facebook. Some people call this vague booking. If you're talking about an emotion or an event, especially regarding a relationship, then you'll say something about it, hoping that the correct audience will know your purpose in posting that. Following all the way down from that heading, if you're wanting to post an emotion and it says, who do you love? If it's Jennifer Lawrence, post that on Imager. If it's the list of recipes you can prepare in repurposed mason jars, put that on Pinterest. If the person you love is my boo, then you put that on Facebook. What you love is TV, then you post about that on Tumblr, according to this article. One of my favorite parts about this infographic is if you just want to post about breakfast, you put that on Instagram. That's a really short part of the piece. But if you want to post a joke that you wrote, you post it on Twitter. If it's something that you didn't write, there is a whole sequence of questions it asks, trying to decide if you should post it on Reddit or other social media sites. So, these sites, you might not think of them as much about audience, but it's a very natural connection to make. Because you reach a different audience, especially if you're kind of selective, if you have a lot of social media accounts, you've probably thought, like, do I want my mom to see this? Then I may or may not post it on Facebook. Or do I want my professor to see this? Do I want a certain friend group to see this? Do I want a whole bunch of strangers to see it? Then you've thought about audience already if you have asked yourself these questions. Moving on specifically to Twitter, I found a really interesting article with rhetorical applications in a magazine called Adweek. They call themselves the Voice of Media. The article was called How to Write the Perfect Tweet. Here is the MLA citation. It was on a site within Adweek called Social Times, the social being social media. So it had these tips that were relevant for our purposes about how to write the perfect tweet, and it's imagining the author is someone who's tweeting on behalf of a business and that their purpose is to basically sell things. And you'll see that in just a second. So it wants you to imagine, and the people who are reading this magazine or this blog are probably involved in somewhere in the business, especially the social media face of the business. So they really have to think carefully about who their audience is, how they present themselves, what kind of ethos they want the company to have, things like that. So the tips that it gives us are think like your readers, that's audience, sell the headline, and I'll get to that in a second, use correct and acceptable punctuation, so that's definitely about your ethos, as is accept nothing less than flawless grammar and perfect spelling. So it's not only your English teachers who care about this stuff. When it says sell the headline in a non-salesman way, it basically means don't seem like you're trying to sell something, because the ethos of a salesperson is kind of creepy and people will just reject it automatically. But your purpose is to sell something, so you want to think very carefully about how you phrase that text, and text it can mean a tweet, but it also means the text as we've talked about it in rhetorical analysis, meaning the actual phrasing, the way something looks on the page, or the words that you choose carefully. When it says use correct and acceptable punctuation, in addition to accept nothing less than flawless grammar and perfect spelling, that's absolutely about your ethos as not really the person who's tweeting on behalf of the company. In that case, you really are the face of the company. So it's about how seriously you want people to take you. If it looks like you are a careful speller and writer, if you've taken the time to proofread, if you're not necessarily the best, most careful writer, or you just don't get that stuff. So knowing when you need to enlist someone's help, or knowing places you can go to look up how to be a more effective, more flawless user of grammar and spelling. And so again, this is the rhetorical term of text, thinking about the more fine-grained, specific choices you make when forming a text, whether that's in an academic paper or a tweet or a Facebook post or a speech. These are all examples of rhetoric, and so I hope that you continue to think about these tools that you've learned when you go out into the big world. So you can reflect on your use of these kinds of text in your reflective analysis paper, and I will see you in the next lecture.